Simpson has been granted parole after serving almost 9 years for an armed robbery in Las Vegas back in 2007.
The former US football star is expected to be released in October, 2 decades after his infamous acquittal in the killing of his ex-wife and her friend. We get details now from Paul Vercammon.
Thank you.
Nevada's parole commissioners unanimously handed O.J. Simpson a get-out-of-prison card. A relieved Simpson heard what he wanted. He will serve the minimum 9 years of a possible 33-year sentence for his role in the 2007 armed robbery and kidnapping of memorabilia dealers Bruce Fremong and Alfred Beardsley, who is now deceased. Simpson pleaded with the commissioners for his freedom from the Lovelock medium security prison.
I'm sorry it happened. I'm sorry to Nevada. 9 years away from your family is just not worth it. And I'm sorry.
Simpson stressed he had been disciplinary free, a model inmate.
I've done my time. I've done it as well and as respectfully as I think anybody can. I think if you talk to the wardens, they'll tell you I gave them my word. I believe in the jury system. I've honored their verdict.
Commissioner Tony Corda calls Simpson's conviction a serious crime, said there was no excuse for it, but added Simpson complied with prison rules and was low risk to reoffend.
The question here, as with all parole hearings, is whether or not you have served enough time in prison on this case. Considering all of these factors, my vote is to grant your parole effective when eligible.
And his colleagues agreed.
Show your hands to the jury.
The board noted Simpson's 1990s legal issues in California had no bearing in Nevada.
Not guilty of the crime of
an allusion to his acquittal for the murders of his ex-wife Nicole Brown Simpson and her friend Ron Goldman. Simpson's life, so often filled with sensational moments, took another twist during the parole hearing. Fremong testified. But unlike so many crime victims who make frightened pleas for parole boards to keep their offender in prison, Fremong asked for his friend O.J. to be set free.
This is a good man. He made a mistake. And if he called me tomorrow and said, Bruce, I'm getting out, will you pick me up? Juice, I'll be here tomorrow for you.
And Simpson revealed his plan after release is to move to Florida.
I could easily stay in Nevada, but I don't think you guys want me here.
The next step, the state of Nevada will hash out very specific terms of his parole. And the commissioner sending a message saying that if O.J. Simpson violates any of the rules of his parole, he could wind up right back in state prison in Nevada. Paul Vercammon, CNN, Lovelock, Nevada.
Well, for more, joining me now is San Diego County Deputy District Attorney Wendy Patrick and Criminal Defense Attorney Brian Claypool. Good to see you both. Wendy, welcome. I think this is your debut appearance, which is fantastic.
It is. Thank you.
Okay, so let's start with you. Any question at all that parole would be granted here?
This hearing was O.J.'s to lose, and the more he spoke, I think his family and his lawyer were afraid that may have been the direction that it was headed.
Exactly, yeah.
I mean, he relitigated the underlying case. He didn't testify during that trial. He was unremorseful, unrepentant. Now, under Nevada law, remorse is not a requirement to be granted parole, but we wanted to see it.
Yeah.
The viewing public wanted to see it. This was the Super Bowl of parole hearings. I've done some of these. Brian probably has too. You don't have victims testifying on behalf of the inmate. They are normally testifying on behalf of the victim.
Right.
So we would have liked to have seen a little bit more remorse, but he was going to get parole anyway.
Right. So, Brian, if you had a client like that on parole and basically showing very little remorse, wanting to relitigate everything, say I'm not offering excuses, and then going on and offering a lot of excuses, what do you do?
Well, first of all, John, was that a parole board hearing we saw this morning?
I don't know what that was.
I thought it was a town hall meeting, and O.J. Simpson was running for Congress. That's kind of how I felt.
Yeah, the board was kind of catatonic in a way. Really did.
Tell me about it.
Except for the NFL tie. Did you see that?
Yeah, I mean, O.J. Simpson's nickname is the Juice. Remember when he was playing football? And I got to tell you, John, I really feel like our legal system has been juiced in this case. And what I mean by that is, you put up there on the screen the murder that took place in 1995. And it's pretty surreal that we're only a few miles from where that murder took place. And I find it really hard to believe in a civilized society that we live in that this parole board is precluded from considering evidence that was presented, a mountain of evidence, a blood trail from the guest room up into O.J.'s room. How do you not consider that evidence in determining whether OJ is a potential risk to society when he's really
or the domestic violence, John.
Yeah, and when he said I have lived this conflict-free life, there was a lot of eye rolling. Look, and you mentioned this because Chris Darden, who was one of the prosecutors in that trial, he basically said that OJ hasn't served long enough. That's what he said.
I like the photographs of OJ in handcuffs more than I like the photographs of OJ with a golf club in his hand. I think he has a lot to account for, and we have yet to extract from him the punishment that he deserves.
So Wendy, a lot of you out there are convinced that Simpson killed his ex-wife and her friend Ron Goldman. There are people out there who now believe, quite rightly, that the Nevada Parole Board set loose a known killer.
That may be true, but there's a lot of people that also believe that they threw the book at OJ when he was convicted and sentenced for the crime where he's serving time right now. There's been a lot of talk about, gosh, somebody wouldn't have gotten even half of that amount.
Yeah, but he had 12 felony counts.
Well, remember also, though, one of the things this parole board really stressed is that they were treating him exactly like any other inmate. So to have not released him, that's right. And remember, it flew under the radar. He was paroled already in 2013 on part of this case. So to say that he's served more time as a model inmate, but now he's somehow not ready for parole, their hands were tied.
Before I get to you, Brian, former LAPD Detective Mark Furman, he played a very controversial role in OJ's murder trial 20-something years ago. He was on Fox News, made some tough statements about Simpson, accused him of lying about owning that sports memorabilia, which was at the center of the armed holdup, saying it wasn't his property. He also went on to say this.
The shocking part of this is the parole board was lied to, and yet it seemed not to matter. Let's call it what it is. I think the fix was in. They wanted rid of Mr. Simpson. They were going to parole him. Nothing he said would probably make any difference. You're seeing a classic sociopath, a narcissist, maybe even a psychopath. And he's talking, manipulating the crowd. He was doing exactly what he tried to do in the civil trial. But in this instance, there was no cross-examination.
Brian, what does he mean by the fix is in, that they wanted to get him out of the system in Nevada?
I hate to tell you, but I completely agree with Mark Furman.
I had a hunch.
Yeah, here's why the fix was in. A couple days ago, the Nevada Parole Board issued a press release, and they never do this. Wendy will tell you that. Never issue a press release before a parole board hearing. And they said, wait a minute, our parole board members are not conservative. Remember, there was an allegation that OJ might not get a fair parole board hearing because they're conservative in Nevada. Well, they came out and said, we're not conservative. Well, that portended the outcome of this parole board hearing. And I agree with Mark Furman. This was a flat-out dog and pony show, and nothing that was said today would have changed anything. And one thing, John, that really troubled me, I was offended by with O.J. Simpson, he had a chance to come clean and say, look, I was irresponsible. I should not have done this, and I apologize to the victims. He never said any of those words. In fact, he lied about, remember he said, I didn't know there was a gun pulled in this room.
Which and then contradicts all the rest of the evidence.
Come on, are you kidding me? That's flat out fiction.
And there was no cross-examination. There would have been cross-examination at the trial.
Okay, so Furman also predicted that Simpson would violate his parole conditions. They look pretty standard. What's the process if they're broken, Wendy, and do you think he will violate?
I think he will violate it because it's going to be a zero-tolerance policy. And you'll notice that the fourth commissioner, before she cast that final vote, said exactly that they're going to be watching him. I'm paraphrasing, but she made it very clear that he's going to be on a short leash. So he should move to Florida. I'm sure that will be permitted. Find a small place near a golf course. I know Chris Darden doesn't want to see a golf club in his hand, but I guess it's better than a weapon. And just live quietly, disappear, except he's got to keep in contact with his parole officer.
And we can all get ready for the reality TV show or whatever it is that will come next.
We know it's coming.
Wendy and Brian, good to see you both. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, John.
Now, coming up, more